everyone. Thanks so much for coming. We are now at the final day of Social Media Week New York here at the Global Society Hub at Big Fuel. Thank you so much for attending, for tweeting along, for checking in. All those things are so great. I'm about to turn it over to some folks behind me who will be chatting about the future of future of social technology. And stay tuned at the end, and we'll have an opportunity if you have any questions. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Okay, so my name is Michoel Ogince. Before we get started, I just want to share something with you that I work here at Big Fuel, and we've been fortunate enough the whole week to have Big Fuel as a global hub for Social Media Week. And in between meetings, I've been sticking my head between these black curtains and trying to get, consume some information. And every time I walk in here, I've seen these bottles of alcohol that haven't been finished yet, and today is the last day of Social Media Week. So, Jason?
I have a cup for a reason.
Okay, so, speaking about the future of social technology, I can't predict the future.
This is water right now, by the way. I'm open to...
So,
it is. So just to preface this...
Jason. Now, why don't we this is social media, let's crowdsource. Anyone want a drink? Come on.
You just put like a little splash, whatever. There we go. All right, so I guess we should preface this a little bit by saying that the future of social technology is a fairly broad topic. So we've put together a list that we're going to work through as just various topics that we can talk about, and then if there's anything you were hoping we'd address or any criticisms or whatever that you have, we're going to leave around 20 minutes at the end to talk about those.
Cool. So before we jump into that, just a short note about each of us. I started my career, at the moment I graduated college, I jumped into the startup space and founded one of the world's first social classified platforms in 2005. I was watching everything move from the newspapers to the internet. First we saw the news and the sports section, followed by the for sale, home rentals and home buying. The only thing that I noticed hadn't moved completely yet was births, deaths, engagements. We still see them in the newspaper today, and kind of launched. It took us a year back then in 2005 to launch a platform. We outsourced all the technology and building to a company in South Africa at that time, and it was a completely different experience to doing it today. But over the years, I've just had my foot in the emerging technology and social space, and here at Big Fuel, I do two major things. One is the evaluation of emerging social technologies. So I'm seeing about 12 platforms a week and evaluating them. I've seen more than 300 platforms in the past year. And in addition to that, Big Fuel is building its own proprietary social technology. The goal is hopefully that it's going to be the world's most advanced social operating system and leading the product development on that. So that's it in a summary. It just gives you some context about why we're speaking, what we are speaking about today.
Cool. My name is Jason Kincaid. I have been a writer at TechCrunch for almost 4 years now. I've written over 3,000 blog posts. I know it's anyway, not that impressive. I'm trying to think any other cool stuff. Oh, TC Cribs. I do this show where I go to startup offices and do goofy tours with lots of cheesy sound effects, which are kind of fun. So if you've ever want to see what the inside of YouTube or Dropbox or a bunch of smaller startups are like, you can check those out. I think that about does it for me. All right, so let's get this started. I'm going to ask you, the first topic we've got on here is on humanizing social media technology, which I don't actually entirely know what that means. So if you want to give us sort of an outline as far as what that means to you and what you guys are doing there, that'd be great.
Sure. So the humanization of social technology is an area that I have a strong passion in and kind of study it in depth. I know that Katerina Fake, the founder of Flickr and Hunch, has a very similar viewpoint as well. And that is that, in truth, please don't tweet this out, social technology has failed to a significant extent. I'm just kidding, you can tweet it. And perhaps to a certain extent, the reason that social technology does not mimic today real human behavior is so complex and has so many layers to it, perhaps because social technology has not aligned with it so accurately, is why it's so powerful and so successful. But I imagine a world, or a social technology world, where the technology mirrors and images human behavior. Let me throw you some examples. So Jason and I work in the same company. He just started, and we get to know each other in the company. Whenever we meet, we talk about social media, venture capital, technology, and after 2 or 3 months at the company, we become friends on Facebook. Now on Facebook, I have to deal with every single thing that Jason shares in his, or most things that he shares in his news stream. He happens to be a passionate snowboarder. And snowboarding is just something that we don't connect on in person together. But all of a sudden in the social space, we have to try and connect, and we have to deal with each other's content of areas of interest that are not necessarily applicable. It's called the interest graph, and Facebook is trying to tackle it, but they're not quite there yet. So there's many other examples that I can share that along the similar lines, but another example, yesterday I went for a stroll up Broadway and went to a new pizza place, and the moment I got there, it literally just opened. They have this massive show inside, and they have this tank outside the pizza store, and they had literally tens and tens of different types of pizzas. I got there, and I just felt like I wanted to share this. And I didn't know, first of all, there was a check-in. If you checked in, you got a special. I wanted to tweet it. There was a deal site that if I showed them this coupon, I would get another special.
Sounds like a pain in the ass.
I wanted to tweet it. I wanted to Facebook. Then I pulled up my blogging app on my iPhone. I wanted to blog about it. And I was just like, I just came there for pizza. And it's just social technology and social sharing is so overwhelming. And at the end, I just sat down and I opened up Path, and I shared my check-in with the closest people to me, which is my closest friends, my wife, and my family happen to be living in Australia. So speaking of Path, there are a number of startups that are tackling this space and trying to make social platforms more human. And I think that Path is very powerful by A, limiting the number of friends that a person can have, and B, the user interface is so clean, and so, you just compare it to any other social network. It's so easy to navigate. There's nothing overwhelming. And furthermore, Path is only, and there are other social platforms that are like this, but I'm just using this as an example. Path is purely mobile. That's a very, very powerful concept. We are mobile. Humans are mobile. We're never in one spot. We're never always in front of our computer or any other social device that you could think of that's stationary. And by enabling or creating a social platform or social sharing platform that's only social and designed specifically for that. David Morin, the founder of Path, founded the Facebook platform as well as Facebook Connect, and I've heard from him a number of times about the effort and the resources that they're putting into only designing for mobile. And if you study their application, it really is phenomenal.
So I'm going to jump in here with a couple questions about this, because I've used Path before. I think it can be great. But I think there are some issues around trying to establish this really small, tight-knit social network with only your close friends. For one, you've got people who you're like sort of acquaintances with, who you might see on a day-to-day basis, who are asking to be your Path friends. Right, so what do you do there? It's sort of an awkward situation where you're basically, you can reject them, and maybe you work with them, for example. Say we've started working together, you add me on Path, I go, I don't like that guy that much. But I'm going to see you every day, right? So maybe I do add you, which kind of defeats the point. The other thing is, there's sort of this trade-off between, I like that feeling when I log into Path and people are like winky facing and smiley facing me, right? And the more people I have on Path, the greater the number of winky faces I get. And so there's sort of this trade-off, or at least this competition between me liking these rewards versus maintaining that small social graph. So what do you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, they haven't perfected the space yet, and the challenge that I'm speaking about, it's very difficult to answer specifically. The only thing I can say is from my own experience, when I did jump on the platform, I only opened up my friendship and my network to the closest people first, because I wanted to test out what I would and what I wouldn't share with such a network. And now that I've worked it out, there's actually been a number of very close colleagues in the workforce that I've rejected from my path.
Would you accept me?
Have some more alcohol now.
See, this hurts my feelings,
Right.
and now I hate Path. I don't actually hate Path. I think it's fine. Although, to be entirely honest, even my close friends, I don't care when they wake up and go to bed. I don't know about you guys. Like, there are maybe,
Right.
if I had a wife, and kids, I'd care.
Right.
I think, but I'd probably already know when my wife got up. So, I don't know. All right, so let's move on to the next topic. And I think this is another one that you've had experience with. So, social commerce. So what extent have you been involved in this stuff, and what are your thoughts on that so far?
Yeah, so I think social commerce is the future of social technology. At the end of the day, brands are trying to capitalize on the social space, and working at Big Fuel and working with Fortune 500 companies, at the end of the day, or even if it's a small business, which we don't do, but just from colleagues in the industry, at the end of the day, it all boils down to what I define as social ROI. And the amount of effort that you put into social, there has to be a return. So the return could be sentiment, if that's what the brand's trying to achieve in the business, in the social space. It could be just general branding. It could be customer service. But at the bottom line, there's transactions and selling. And that's what happened in the web space 10, 15, 20 years ago when everyone needed a website and there was e-commerce. And I think everything's going to move from e-commerce to S-commerce, which is social commerce in the social space. And we're seeing that right now. There's just one of the platforms that I evaluated, I think out of Colorado, don't quote me on that, company called 8th Bridge. They enable in-stream Facebook shopping. So let's just say that you like a brand on Facebook, let's just say it's Nike, and Nike push out a post that has a new basketball shoe. When that basketball shoe shows up in your news stream, in your news feed, you can rotate it, you can alternate it, you can change the colors, and you can enter your credit card details there and then in your news stream. And in addition to that, the moment you do that, there's the opportunity to share it with your social graph. So, I think Twitter's going to follow, whether it's an external party, or I've heard some rumors that they're doing it internally with, just like Twitter currently. In native Twitter, if it's a video or a tweet pic, you can click on the tweet and it opens up in native Twitter. So in the moment a brand shares a product that is either discounted or a new product, you'll be able to purchase that product in stream. And we're going to see it everywhere across all social platforms. I think Foursquare is going to follow the same suit. I feel it's very frustrating when there's an offer on Foursquare and you have to go up to the counter and show them that, once you've checked in. Once you check in through NFC, near field communications, which Foursquare has just enabled, you'll be able to purchase it from your mobile device.
So how is this that different than just subscribing to an email from one of these brands and getting their offers and their updates? Because you've been able to do that for a long time, and I understand that there's this idea of syndicating what you've just purchased through Facebook or Twitter or whatever, and you can share that with people. But you've also been able to do that, and frankly, most of the time when I have that option, I don't do it because I don't think my friends care that I just bought some random junk on Amazon.
Right.
And even if it were something that I was really excited about buying, I still don't think most of my friends would care.
So that's a very valid point, and I think that there are some people in the social space who have an aversion and prefer not to share some things. But the fact that you'll be able to make the purchase in the social space is what's so powerful, because consumers are spending the majority of the time online in the social space.
So is it truly social, or it's more just putting the sale in the social stream? If that makes sense.
It's a mixture of both.
Okay, yeah, I guess that was kind of a weird question. All right, let's do the...
Cool, so Jason, being at TechCrunch, you have a vast knowledge of the VC space, and Jason and I were speaking on the phone this week, and you mentioned, I actually had some conflicting interests over here, but the future of VCs and social startups. Right now, VCs are just throwing money into social startups. Your thoughts on that? What's going to happen? Will there be consolidation? Supply versus demand.
I think we've seen this trend several times before, where you'll see consolidation of certain types of social thing. Social is such a broad term. I don't think you can really make a blanket prediction as far as what's going to happen. I think we're going to see what we've seen in the past, where you'll see one service start to get some traction, you'll see a bunch of services that do something similar, oftentimes with some kind of twist. And then over time, some of those will fade out and they'll consolidate to some extent. Whether or not I think VCs are going to start shying away from investing in social platforms, I don't think so. I think we're still so early on at this point that I really think we haven't even begun to see like the really exciting social companies. I think that even the companies that are, and we can talk about this in a little bit, that are supposedly social, like Zynga, for example, I don't think Zynga is, in many cases, is what I would consider social. I think it's really great at tapping into human psychology, but as far as making me feel like I'm interacting with my friends, not so much. So if I were a VC, I would be looking for those experiences or for those services that really, it doesn't necessarily have to be a synchronous interaction. It can be asynchronous, but something that has a little more of there's this factor where I feel like I'm doing something with my friends or even with people I don't necessarily know but may share a common interest with. So I do think there are going to be opportunities there. I don't know if that entirely answers your question.
Right, yeah, no, definitely. Okay, social technology, social startups, and the medical space. This is one area that has not yet taken off. I have a thought or a theory that perhaps it's because of legal and privacy issues. We were talking about this before.
Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, I think, for one, I can't think of any really compelling health-related social startups that have come up recently. But I think you're dealing not just with potential like legal or privacy issues, but also this is sort of social norm thing where I don't really tell people about if I had ailments, I don't. But if I did, I wouldn't necessarily feel compelled to tell anyone about them, right? So it's just, I think if there is going to be more, I don't know if progress is the right word, more activity here, it'd probably be around health in the sense of encouraging people to do exercise. Or there have been startups that are around, who was it? Like I think Obvious is working on this. These are the ex-Twitter guys. This thing where it's like helping use your social graph to push you toward a goal. So for like quitting smoking, for example, or something like that. So I think that if there is going to be more development around health, it's going to be in stuff like that as opposed to, I don't even know where else health would really get social. I feel like asking my friends what this ailment, what's it like to deal with this awful sickness? Oh, let me tell you about my tips. I don't know. It just gets a little weird. It's
definitely not something social. Perhaps the only other area that I could foresee it maybe coming into play is between, medical professionals and patients in a very private manner.
Yep.
I think we're seeing that a little bit yet. It's also in its infancy stage, but definitely more space there.
Right. I mean, there are like forums and stuff out there that are around a specific condition or disease, but as far as like a Facebook for health, I don't really see that springing up anytime soon. What are some other things you want to talk about? Oh, social gaming. So are you a social gamer at all?
Nope.
No. Okay.
Facebook, speaking of humanizing social technology, Facebook to me, sorry to go back to Path, but since I started using Path, my Facebook usage has decreased by about 70% and Foursquare at 100%. And I feel like Facebook is just like this, content dumping stream with advertisements on the side and pictures of my friend's cat with games. That's not social. And I think because of that, I've struggled to latch onto social games. I've seen for our clients how we've been able to leverage social gaming for them.
Are there any examples you can talk about? I'm actually kind of curious how these big brands, because that's generally who you guys represent, how they look at social gaming.
Right. So I think for them, social gaming is a way to achieve business goals in the social space. So if the business goal is to identify brand advocates, there might be an app in a Facebook tab on the brand page that would enable some sort of gaming aspect.
What about, I know Zynga has done various integrations of big brands. I think Lady Gaga had something. Is this something you're seeing brands talk about a lot, like having their item appear as a virtual good in these games?
Yeah, I mean, I remember Toyota did, not one of our clients, but I remember Toyota did something like that. There was this kid, he must have been, I think, under 15 approximately, and he developed this Monopoly game on Facebook, and it just took off, and the amount of users that were was exponential each week. And Toyota bought a square on the Monopoly board, and that was like their digital, board. That was their news board to get their product out. We specifically haven't done things like that. For us, it's been more like, I remember I wasn't involved in this campaign, so I don't recall the exact details, but for Buick and the NCAA championships, we had like this badging competition where people could participate in watching videos from a human highlight reel of people who have participated in college sports and become very successful. And it kind of like identified, it did two things: identified advocates, and it made people who are fans share content about the brand, which is very powerful.
So I have a prediction I'm going to make about social gaming. And it's actually, I'm not the first person to say this. So Zynga's games are obviously the prime example here, and they're many millions of users and IPO and all that good stuff. I think I think Zynga's been burning through users, at least with their Ville series. The Farmville games and before that, like the Mob or Mafia Wars, these games are very similar to games that existed long before Zynga did, as far as the incentive structures and getting you to come back at regular intervals and so on. And I actually was hooked on one of these a long time ago, like we're talking a decade ago. And what I found is I played it a lot, and I got really good at it. And then at some point I just kind of hit a wall where I said, I don't really know why I spent all this time playing this game. Like I was waking up early in the morning so that I could destroy these opponents. Like I was really into it, and I was really good at it. And then you just like, real life came knocking one day, and I was like, do I like storm the castle or go to a party? Right? And eventually the party won out, okay? So I think with Zynga, what's happening is you play these games, and I don't really have fun playing those games. And I've actually had this debate with various people in the industry before. I think Zynga's figured out a way to synthesize, it's almost like gambling. Where it's like you get this reward and you want to do it more, but you don't necessarily think back like, gosh, that was really enjoyable. I'm glad my farm is really working out for me. Like, it's just not that, right? And so what I think is going to happen, and I think it may already be happening, because if you look at their monthly users and so on, I think they've been on the decline. People get really into these games, they pour a lot of time and money into them, and they burn out. And then maybe they move on to the next game, but over time, they sort of they don't see the point anymore. And this is especially true when they're actually putting real money into the game, in which case they're like, wow, because there's some very small percentage of users who represent the majority of Zynga's revenue. And so every time one of those dies off, if you will, not literally, just figuratively, hopefully, that's bad news for Zynga. So I really think that they're going to have to, and they have other games, they've been acquiring plenty of other studios. They have the guys who did Words with Friends, and I'm sure they're working on other games that are diverging from the same model that they've kept iterating on over and over and over again. It's actually sort of funny to me at this point when you see a new Ville game, and like Zynga will say something like, this is the most social version yet, and you play it, and like, so the social activity involves looking at my friend's farm and clicking like 3 times. It's not, I mean, how is that really social? Is what I did, does that really change their experience with the game? I don't think so. So I expect that we're going to see sort of an evolution, or at least I think it would be to Zynga's benefit if there's an evolution in the way their games work, and that they actually involve, I think skill is an important component, because when skill's involved, even if you don't need a whole lot, but you still feel like you're actually accomplishing something, I just think their games need to be more fun. So that's my rant on Zynga.
Great, thank you. It's definitely more than I could shed light on. Okay, Jason, tell me something. I noticed, I was looking back this week at some of your blog posts on TechCrunch, and I noticed that they're very Google-centric. 2 questions. First of all, is there a specific reason for that? And more importantly, related to our topic today, the social product strategy between Google and Apple. They seem to be taking a very different approach. Google has built their own social platform, and it seems like they're baking it into every single product. And Apple tried with, I think it was Ping, and now they've like leveraged Twitter and baking that into, the iOS system. Right. Where do you see that? Where do you see that going?
Okay, so a couple things. The reason why I tend to do more Google stuff than like Apple stuff, for example, is my colleague MG Siegler, as some of you may know. He handles most of the Apple stuff. So if there is a discrepancy, I guess in the balance of the force, that's why. as far as the different strategies between Google and Apple, I feel like Apple wasn't really paying a whole lot of attention to its social strategy for a long time. I mean, to some extent, Google wasn't either. They had the social circles feature, and then they looked at Facebook years later than they should have, and go, oh, this is actually going somewhere. Maybe we should do something about that, which is where Google Plus came from. As far as how Google Plus is working so far and the integration into various products, I think the product itself still has a long way to go. When you're on Google Plus and you're sharing things, it feels very much like Facebook, which wouldn't be a bad thing if Facebook didn't exist.
Right.
But it does, so you're sort of like, well, I actually see Google Plus as a stronger competitor to Twitter than I do to Facebook, at least as far as the interactions I've had on it. I'll share something, I'll get a lot of, or some comments from people I don't know, but who may be following me. And the nice thing about it versus Twitter is that the format is such that you can leave a comment as long as you want. I can post videos and photos inline. It's just sort of you feel less constrained. Of course, that's one of the valuable things with Twitter.
Right.
Apple strategy, yeah, I have no idea what they're doing. Ping was obviously going to be their big thing. It didn't work out so well. As far as the integration with Twitter, I'm sure there's more behind the logic here, so
right.
I may be taking sort of like the easy answer, but I feel like it's a way to kind of get Facebook to play ball with them. Or Apple and Facebook had previously been in discussions about having Facebook integrated into iOS.
Right.
I believe Steve Jobs was saying that Facebook wanted terms that Apple wasn't willing to deal with, and so Apple said, all right, fine, we're going to do Twitter, and Facebook is basically watching as every iOS user is prompted to enter their Twitter credentials,
right.
and they can share it directly from the OS. And at some point, Apple is probably betting that Facebook is going to say, all right, fine, we give.
Right.
Whether or not it's going to happen, who knows?
Right.
Also, one other thing that I think there's an opportunity, there's this big, and I saw a couple of posts about this, so this isn't my original idea or anything, but there's this big uproar over the fact that a lot of applications on iOS, Path specifically, but it was sort of unfair because a lot of applications do the same thing as far as uploading a user's entire address book. Oftentimes it was because an application wanted to see if you had any other friends that were already using the application. I don't know if you guys followed the story. There's an opportunity there for Apple to point out which of your friends already have this application. Right? That would totally make sense, and it's sort of curious as to why they haven't done that yet, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's something they do start introducing. They have, what is it called, Game Room. They have this gaming platform built into iOS. I wouldn't be surprised if in the next iteration of iOS they have something a little more robust, helping both recommend and it lets you see which apps your friends are already using.
Right.
So those are my thoughts. Cool. You want to go into the apps versus HTML5?
Yeah, so there's a colleague of mine and a venture capitalist, and he has a strong belief that the App Store is going to vanish and kind of die off, and we're going to be accessing everything that we do through the app world through HTML5 or eventually HTML6. And I remember reading, I think it was on TechCrunch maybe 4 or 5 months ago, an article about the challenge of searching for so many apps and how do you find A, on your device, both Android and iOS, and B, in the actual store to access a specific, app. How is this going to be solved? Do you foresee that everything's going to move to native web?
To HTML5, you mean?
Yeah.
Or yeah. All right, so this is something that I've had people telling me for years now, that the web is going to replace the App Store and that the difference between Android and iOS is going to become less relevant over time and so on. It obviously hasn't come to fruition yet, and judging by the developer, the posts I've seen, it's not going to happen anytime soon. You've got these APIs related to the phone's hardware that the web can't access yet at this point, and there's progress there, but it's not there yet. The performance, generally speaking, isn't really comparable. I'm using the Chrome beta on my Android phone. I've got the Galaxy Nexus, which is like the newest Android phone, and it still doesn't feel nearly as fluid as a native application does. So I think it'll get closer and closer. The other thing is that applications can also move faster as far as the functionality that Google in the case of Android or Apple in the case of iOS can allow the phone and the applications to access, if that makes sense. They can introduce a new sensor without having to wait for there to be a new HTML5 spec for it.
Right.
That said, I think over the coming years we're going to get closer, and that we'll probably start seeing companies launch. I mean, you already see this where they'll launch a web app and then native applications.
Right.
I think they'll probably make their web apps better and better as they can.
Right.
So
Yeah, one of the things that I've seen, you can briefly touch on this, is a number of services that are developing all the back-end and cloud services for general apps and specifically social apps. So, social gaming components, geolocation. I know you've written quite a bit on Avery, which is a photo editing cloud service that app developers can access these services on the back end and just automatically in an automated process and just focus on all the front end of the app. And I think that's one area that makes it challenging for everything to slowly or slows down the shift to native HTML5. So I mean, I'm not sure what the future holds, but it's going to be interesting to see how that rolls out.
Okay. So is this clock right? It's 1:34.
The time.
All right. So let's
We've
ask
got five,
Okay. So
seven,
we had a
7
couple
minutes left.
questions. These are big thinking questions, I guess. I'll ask you the first one. What does the far-fetched future look like?
So I think that social technology is going to invade and penetrate every aspect of human society.
Sounds scary.
We're already seeing it. Some of our clients are global consumer electronic clients. We're seeing, not under necessarily our recommendation, but we're seeing social technology being built into home appliances. And I think it's not going to necessarily be you friending your friend. You're going to become a friend with your refrigerator. And I've seen the technology. I've actually played with it. And Facebook and a number of recipe apps and food shopping apps are baked into the refrigerator with this awesome 11-inch screen on the refrigerator. And I think that's going to happen everywhere. And if you really want to stretch it, I think there's going to be microchips in literally everything. You could go as far as, and I've actually written about this before on my blog and the company's blog, that we're going to see microchips in our clothing. It's going to be like, I'm going to walk past Jason in the street, and my friend on Facebook will be connected to Jason, but we're not connected. And the chip has learnt my fashion sense and what I like to wear, and is going to realize that Jason is wearing the same thing because he also has a chip in his clothing, and is going to make a recommendation to me in an automated fashion that this is what he's wearing and this is where he purchased it.
This sounds awful. I think the future is going to look like that.
I don't know if I want to wear your clothes.
All right, so to me, this is the way the future is going to look like for about 5 minutes, and then we're going to realize that we hate it. I think what's going to happen is, I think you're absolutely right that all of our devices are going to be connected to the web. Android is going to be running on everything. You're going to have an Android running on your laundry machine. I mean, Apple is going to do it too, but I think Android is better positioned at this point to get baked into a lot of consumer electronics. I'm sure Apple has plans along these lines. They'll probably have designated partners they're working with. In any case, you're going to walk into your house, you're going to have stuff on your refrigerator telling you to do stuff, you're going to have your toaster, whatever. And I think it's going to be sort of overwhelming because it's really nice to not have to deal with email or Twitter or whatever for some time during the day. And when you have everything telling you what your friends are saying, at some point you say, like, all right, enough already. Like, I totally experience this all the time. I'm kind of oversaturated more so than your average person, I think, in terms of the inbound communication. But I think everyone will get sick of this stuff at some point. And I think we're going to increasingly kind of define boundaries as far as when we're going to want to hear this or see this stuff and when we're not. As for the wearable clothing thing, I think Jawbone is actually specifically targeting this market and making like computerized clothing. That's probably not the term they're using. And I think that there's some cool stuff that can come out of that. But again, I don't want to get a recommendation about a shirt from someone I walked past or whatever that was, right? It just doesn't sound, I get an alert. I already get bugged. I mean, there's been all this talk about serendipitous interaction. right? I don't really want serendipitous stuff. I don't want to deal with my friend who is like my friend. Oh yeah, I'm on the same block. You want to get coffee? Like, not really. I would have asked you if I wanted to get coffee. Thanks very much. Like, I'm sort of antisocial, I guess, but it's just these like surprise meetings. Not my cup of tea. And maybe I'm unique in this case, but I do think even for people more social than me, we're gonna want to kind of unplug for a while. Like, it's really nice to just say, I'm not looking at my email, and you'll have withdrawal. I have withdrawals when I'm not looking at my email, but it's still nice once you get past those.
Right.
All right. And now for our last question, another big question. Your advice to entrepreneurs.
Okay, so kind of two things. One is success. I think you can be successful without being an entrepreneur. And then there's an entrepreneur who is successful, and I think they're two different things. But so in terms of being successful, because I don't think everyone has to be or has the desire or perhaps has an innate DNA of some sort of desire to be an entrepreneur. So to be successful at whatever you're doing, I think it boils down to passion. I've seen too many people throughout my life go to bed dreading the next day. I go to bed at night excited to wake up for the next day for what I'm doing. And I think that's one of the keys to being successful. In terms of an entrepreneur, when I founded my first startup in 2005, so my colleague, who actually started out as a dentist and kind of moved out of this space into the startup world, he said to me an amazing thing, and I've lived with this since then. He said that the university or college system puts us in a bucket and turns us into a cow. And he said to me that a cow has its own pastures and it grazes in its own, square meters, and when it sees a fence, it doesn't go near it. He said to me, Michoel, if you want to be successful, you have to be a rhinoceros. When you see the fence, you have to take a risk and just move through it and jump through it, and don't be afraid what's on the other side. And I think, any entrepreneur is not willing to take a risk, of course with passion, but you got to be able to take that risk, and I think that's one of the keys to being, entrepreneurially successful.
Okay.
Your advice?
Yeah. So I've seen a lot of panels, and I see a lot of anecdotes and like accomplished entrepreneurs telling other entrepreneurs what they should do. Like, my takeaway from these is that don't spend all your time looking to other entrepreneurs to tell you what you should be doing. You're going to hear the same stuff over and over again. And so panels like this are great for like seeing people like him who can serve as an inspiration to you. But in terms of like some takeaway tidbit that's going to change how you're going to run your company, I find that it's unlikely that that's going to happen. So I wouldn't run around feeling like you need to hear every single bit of advice out there. I don't know if that makes sense.
Sure, 100%. And I think, when it comes to reading, so many entrepreneurial books and by different leaders in the space, that's something actually that I stay away from, because there's just so many, and like every day there's another book on Amazon that, you ought to read because it will help you be successful, and it's kind of like, there's just too much. So I 100% agree with you. So just, we're going to jump into questions. Before we jump into questions, I just share that if anyone wants to reach out to us in person, we'll do so afterwards. You can follow Jason on Twitter, Jason
Kincaid.
Cool, and I'm at Twabbi, Twabbi on Twitter.
One thing to notice, my name at the top has a second K. It's actually a C. It's okay. I don't take offense. All right,
Cool.
so questions.
Fire away.
Let's just raise your hand. Choose a mic, whatever.
So you guys touched a little bit upon, I guess, something I heard about yesterday, which is, I guess the term was frictionless sharing, which is kind of just turning on and off how much you share. And there were some people from Yahoo that said that they did studies, and 70% of the people that left their sharing on were below the age of 30. Do you think that people will, of younger generations are adapting into a social world, and it will become, in fact, more of like, you know what I'm doing a lot of the time, and I turn it off sometimes?
So is this on a Yahoo service? Or frictionless sharing is generally like, it's a Facebook thing that they're reference to, with their open graph stuff that they launched the most recent F8. there's this, like the Washington Post reader, if you've seen that, where you click it, you install the app, and then every time you read something in the app, it shares that with your friends, which I find totally obnoxious. So was that what they were talking about, or were they talking about Yahoo?
They were talking
services?
about stuff like that, but I just find it
Okay.
interesting that like kind of a younger demographic is more apt to just share more, and that you know, is it going to be, is it something that's coming up, and that, you know, or is it the age divide is what interests me.
I don't know. I'm actually wondering, maybe they controlled for this, how many of those people actually knew that they were sharing all of that content? Because I think younger people are generally more proactive about controlling their privacy settings. That's what my understanding was. But this may be totally different. My take on the whole frictionless sharing thing, when Facebook initially launched that, they did it with a handful of applications, Washington Post being one of them. And I think they went with the wrong apps. I think there are certain types of content that I don't really care about sharing all the time. I'm trying to think of a good one. There aren't a whole lot of them. I don't know, maybe if I went running, maybe not though. But the ones they launched with Spotify, for example, and the Washington Post one, there's this risk, if you can call it that, I perceive it as one, where I'll listen to like Britney Spears or something and it gets shared. And I don't care a lot what people think, but you know, maybe I'll get someone making fun of the fact that I like Britney Spears. Why am I sharing that? Like, what value did I derive out of sharing that automatically? And so I think they still have to figure out the recipe there. As far as, I don't know the answer as to why younger people would be more likely to do this.
Yeah, I think I've seen I guess it's a generalization, but I've seen a lot of confusion in the younger generation. They're not sure what they're sharing and what they're not sharing. Intently, they don't know what they want to be shared and what they don't want to share, and who with. And I think I've seen some friends who are just like staying away from the social space because of that, and the others who are taking the opposite approach, that you know, they're just obsessed with sharing and want to kind of like, you know, dive in. I think, you know, coming onto Facebook today with a young mind and a more, you know, computer focused person is a little bit easier to navigate Facebook and, you know, latch onto the platform, and Twitter for that matter, and many others. But I mean, I know you know, some people in my social circle who are much older than me, in their 50s and 60s. For them, it's been very, very difficult to latch onto these networks.
And there's another thing that could help explain this. Back when Facebook first launched they had this thing in, I think it was winter '09, where they switched the default status update from friends of friends, I think it was, to public.
Right.
And I had this conversation with a guy named Elliot Schrage. I'm saying his name wrong, but he's Facebook's top PR guy. And I was basically saying that you're potentially allowing these young adults, people who are 18 and up can do this, to share content publicly that could hurt them down the line, maybe when they're out of college looking for a job. And his point was that social norms will change, where it won't be that weird if you had that drunk photo or this unpolitically correct update or whatever. I don't think that's right, because the people doing the hiring for a long time now aren't in that demographic. And this is the reason why I had such a serious issue when they did that. I don't think they really gave people clear enough warning as to what was going on there. And the stat they were talking about at that point was something like over half of users have changed their privacy settings. I'm like, so almost half, it was like 50% or 60%. I was like, so 40% of users don't understand this stuff at all. Out of how many 100 million people? Like, that's not a great thing. And I don't want to bash them too hard, because I think they have gotten somewhat better at this stuff, but maybe people just aren't aware as to the risks they're facing by oversharing, because they're not thinking about that job, right? So.
Yeah, so what I'm really excited about is the peer-to-peer economy that's emerging, and
Sorry,
I think,
can I just interrupt for a second? Can you, sorry, if everyone can just share perhaps their name and also where you're from, that'd be great. Thank you.
my name is Alex. I'm from Ithaca, New York, and I'm the founder of a website called Swidget, which is, well, I'm not going to get into that, but It's about the peer-to-peer economy, because that's what I'm really excited about. Anyway,
Cool.
and I think a lot of that's going to be happening at a local level, and I'm just wondering your opinion on the next few years where you see social technology facilitating this collaborative community economy and really allowing people to gain better access to the resources around them on a very sort of small level, because we talk so much about the way sharing now, and we have this global thing. Like, how is this going to kind of go local and small and allow us to connect better with the people around us?
So I understand your question
Oh
correctly.
yeah, I know. I touched on a few things. I mean, I guess
so
I'm specifically interested in the collaborative consumption, peer-to-peer economy, and allowing
Right.
people to have a new economy where you're doing business with each other rather than supporting corporations and allowing people to
Right.
directly
like-
engage in a marketplace with one another.
Is this like if I got to get my car fixed, I can ask one of my friends to, or a friend of a friend? That sort of thing?
It's every. I mean, Airbnb is a very emerging
Okay.
example of this, but sharing your car, renting out tools,
Right. Okay.
whatever it is,
So-
Etsy. I mean, person-to-person marketplaces.
Right. So I think there's like a couple things in here. One is perhaps micro-targeting, allowing brands, small businesses, anyone who has a product or a service to micro-target to the correct consumer. But one of the things that I've seen kind of like popping up in the social space, and it's also very, very early stages, it's got a long way to go, and that is niche networks. You can't go to Twitter and Facebook for everything. You know, if I met with a company a couple of weeks ago that is they haven't launched yet, but it's a beer sharing social network. And I think it's very smart. I think it's a great idea, because if you're passionate, or if that's what you want to find out more information about, if that's your whole life, you'll be able to go there and do it. It's kind of like what happened in the blogosphere and the forum sphere. And perhaps we're going to see more of that in the social space with networks cropping up for, we've seen it with travel. Arrington always writes about GoGoBot. Is that what it's called?
Yep.
Yeah, GoGoBot. I mean, that's an unbelievable startup, and the amount of capital they've got invested in the team behind them are really amazing. And it's a genius idea, because it's so Facebook's technology is not designed for consumers to share information only about travel and hotels and flights and albums that are related to different like time periods to that specific location. And so we're seeing it there. Obviously we saw it with LinkedIn in terms of professional services, that things that you would do on LinkedIn you would never do on Facebook, and vice versa. And food spotting is another example. This is early stage with all this. I think we're going to see much more of this, and I actually think it's going to take people away from the major social networks and going to slot them automatically into I'm going to be in X, Y, and Z because these are my passions, these are my interest points, these are the people I want to connect with. To answer your question?
As to the commerce-related stuff, I guess I can speak a little bit to like my experience using Airbnb and that sort of thing. I guess more broadly, the question I have is, what value do I get out as a user out of hiring a friend of a friend as a mechanic or whatever, as opposed to going to a reputable person who I looked up on Yelp? And you could say, well, your friend, you can trust them because you know their friend, right? And you can ask your friend, is this person a good person to speak to? So the issue I've had, maybe this goes back to me being sort of antisocial, every time I've used one of these services where it said, so like with Airbnb, I'm browsing through the listing and, I know someone who knows the person renting their apartment out. But I haven't talked to that friend in a really long time, so it'd be a little weird for me to IM them out of the blue, like, hey, do you know this guy? And so the number of people who I actually interact with on a day-to-day basis, who I'd feel comfortable asking, like, hey, is this a reasonable person for me to stay at their apartment with, that's actually a fairly small number. Which isn't to say it's not valuable. It's just I don't think showing three faces of people I haven't talked to since college isn't really going to convince me to work with someone. And then, I don't know if this is what you're asking about, but like, hiring the guy down the street, again, I'm not sure I totally understand what value I get as a user out of doing that as opposed to just looking it up on Yelp. So I don't know if maybe that you have like more to follow up on with that, or does that answer your question at all? Or
I mean, partly. I think those are a lot of interesting points. And
Okay.
I guess if you could use a social network to have technically, if you could use a social technology to have not perfect because that would be scary, but much improved information about, say, everything, all the resources and skills and opportunities are available in your apartment building, like a very Like that
So
would
that
be
would
an
be-
incredibly powerful thing.
Right. So I think that's useful, and that isn't necessarily tied to my friends. One thing. So I moderated a panel earlier this week on the integration of social with search, and there was this idea of I have an issue with my car, and Bing can tell me that, hey, my buddy knows cars really well. Well, the issue at this point is that I think they call it the expert graph. They don't know who knows what at this point, and so trying to do something like what you're describing, as far as telling you who can do what in your building, unless this is what your service does, as far as letting people opt in to describing their skills, which actually can be kind of cool. But as far as like an automated system that can look at your Facebook profile or LinkedIn profile and tell your friends what skills you have, I don't think they're not there yet. Sorry.
So yeah, if I could just add like 10 cents on this, it's a little bit of a tangent, but related that. I remember in the early 90s where I think it was the US government launched SETI, which was the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, and they would curate and mine data and organize data from computers that are not being used. So when you went to sleep at night and you weren't using your computer, they would utilize the system for that. So we haven't touched on this today, and it's probably an hour in itself, but social data, you know, co-founder of LinkedIn, you know, said that social data is going to be, you know, Web 3 and Web 4 and the real future, and I think he has a valid point. But you know, I foresee there's so much data that's being curated on every single social network. If that was optimized and kind of put in different buckets in the right manner, humans and society could gain so much from that. Can you imagine if we, let's just say, you know, taking data from Yelp and Zynga and Farmville and like utilizing that to learn how to cope with a natural disaster or a massive farming, you know, poverty or development, something like that in a third world country. So, you know, I think there's opportunity there. It's kind of in our topic of like the far-fetched future, but I foresee something like that happen of actually leveraging all the social data that companies are building.
So I think we probably have time for another question or two. Or
I think
like,
one more question from right over here.
this guy.
Hi, my name is Trevor. I work on the social team at MEC, a digital media agency here in Manhattan. And I can absolutely relate to the kind of reality check kind of backlash that you described about social gaming. And I was wondering if you think there's going to be kind of a larger reality check within the massive social user base where people just realize, wait, what am I getting out of this? Why have I put so much time into liking things on Facebook and sharing what music I'm listening to? Right. Is this valuable to me or to my friends? Why am I doing this?
So I've been asking myself that for a long time. I've been on Facebook, this is how cool I am. I've been on Facebook for a really long time now. I was at UCLA when it came out, and I was like the 31st person at UCLA to be on it, so yeah, go me. I knew it was going to be big even back then. And I've been asking myself for a long time, why do I still do this? And I think the thing that Facebook has going for it is that looking at your friends' photos doesn't really get old. And looking up that girl you have a crush on doesn't get old. And looking up, like, whatever. Like, so there's these fundamental things that people are going to keep on doing, and I don't think that people are going to get tired of. As far as getting tired of likes, I think the amount of time it takes to like something is so low that that's probably not going to go away soon. But I do think Facebook's going to have to keep evolving over time. I don't think it's going to look like it does now 3 years from now even. I think it's going to keep reinventing itself it's going to keep this fundamental, the graph, and it's going to figure out cool things to do with it. I do think there might be some backlash. I don't know if it'll be backlash. These things will just become less effective. The idea that sticking your friend's name next to a piece of content somehow makes it more interesting, I think is going to get old. So like right now, the way Facebook ads frequently work is you'll look at Facebook in the right sidebar, and you see that like some random friend likes this brand. And you're like, okie dokie. Maybe you even click on that brand. But to me, if that happens, it might trigger this like little thing in the back of my head that goes like, oh, I know that person, I'm going to click on that. But if I'm unless I'm interested in that piece of content or in that brand, over time I'm going to learn to just stop clicking on this stuff that my friend's name is next to. Right? It needs to have the overlap of being, like, it has to be, the fact that my friend liked it can't be the only reason that I'm interested in it. If that makes sense. Hopefully it does. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, up front, we got time maybe for one more.
Hi, my name is Ann McDermott. I work for IBM. And I've been in technology a long time. So been on social networks. And I created a social network for my family on Facebook. As you're talking about pictures, that's what made me think of it. And so I'm wondering, have you heard anything about social networks for people who have passed away? Because
Yeah,
I actually wanted to have a tweet for my grandmother, for instance, because there's a lot of descendants there. Just a thought.
Yeah, there's a service, I think it's called 1,000 Memories. And there are probably other services out there as well that do something similar, where the idea is that you can kind of, they originally did like a digital memorial kind of thing, and then you could allow people, I think they still have this, where people can contribute to this kind of shared memorial where everyone can add a story, can add these photos. So, whereas if someone passed away 10 years ago and someone had this rare photo, it would be pretty hard to show that photo to their extended family. And with this, you upload that photo once, and it goes onto this profile where everyone can see it and leave comments, say like, this is cool and stuff. So check it out. Anything else? I think we got 20 seconds left. Cool. All right.
Cool, great, thank you. So just maybe I can just a word of thanks to everyone at Social Media Week for putting this all together. A thank you to Big Fuel and our communication staff who've done an amazing job. And above all, Jason, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Cool.